Hey there. On this episode of On Thriving, I talk with my friend, tarot reader, teacher, and one of OPA's most promising astrologers, Mallory Hasty. We recorded this episode back in early May of 2022, and I'm now releasing it as Jupiter stations retrograde in the very last degrees of Pisces for the last few weeks of that transit, because it's happening November 23rd, I believe, is when Jupiter will station direct, and then it's going to re-enter Aries on December 20th of 2022. Because in this episode, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about Jupiter and Pisces and Aries. Mallory has three planets, what we call a stellium in Pisces. So when we get together and her stellium and my four Pisces placements, my ascendant, my North Node, my Juno and White Moon, we have a very fantastic daydreaming in and out of time. We go to the present and the here, the now, the past, the future, kind of time jumping with talking about taxation and representation and the Black Death and COVID. We get kind of pie in the sky. And it's just this journey where we feel our way through and we go with the flow. We talk about utopia and our relationship to power and wealth. We talk about whose wars we fight, which is really important, not just because of what we talked about in the episode, but also because this coming spring, we're going to have a Jupiter Chiron conjunction in Aries. We're going to start seeing eclipses in the sign of Aries and Libra. And all of this is really about that question of whose wars we fight and why, whether it's a literal war or just like who you're working for. So we also talk about Henry VIII's karma and reincarnation, Sagittarius, the ninth house, the fourth house, what it's like to find home when you have all of this mutable like Pisces energy. We get into the mind mycelium network, compassion, making the world a better place, and a lot of stuff from history. So we talk about the Peasants' Revolt and the Jacques Louis, and I said that wrong, but it's okay. And really about like how astrology can help us to quickly develop compassion. And you'll hear Mallory at the end talk about her class in June. Again, that's because we recorded back in May. But if you follow Mallory online, check out her website. It's malloryhasty.com. You'll be up to date on her most recent offerings and classes. I highly recommend checking them out. She does have at least 2 classes on her website for sale right now. So definitely check them out. She's an amazing teacher, amazing astrologer, amazing tarot reader and teacher. So I hope you enjoy the episode. Tell us how Pisces you think it is. Leave us comments below with your thoughts and questions and what you want to know more about. So that's it. I hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome to On Thriving. I'm your host, Taylor Shuler. I'm an astrologer, and I'm here to give you your horoscopes, interviews, and astrology readings with changemakers to help you enjoy your life and take practical action in making the world a better place. Okay, welcome back, everyone. I'm so excited to be here today with Mallory Hasty, wonderful astrologer, my good friend, and so excited she's here today. So let me tell you a little bit about Mallory. Mallory Hasty uses she, her pronouns, is a consulting astrologer, tarot teacher, and intuitive healer. With her degree in English writing and religious studies, her knowledge of poetry, literature, and religion often makes its way into her healing work, as well as her teachings and classes. Her astrological practice is rooted in the Hellenistic tradition, her main focus being to guide clients towards embodiment, inner child healing, and nervous system homeostasis. She loves to work with highly sensitive people because she is one herself. Mallory is currently pursuing professional certification through the Organization for Professional Astrology, OPA, and was recently named one of OPA's most promising astrologers. So you can connect more with her at malloryhasty.com. So thank you, Mallory, so much for being here. I'm so excited.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. And I will always say yes to having a chat with you. So I'm excited.
Awesome. So this is the Utopia podcast, and we talk a bit about, how to make the world a better place and finding our way. And, we all reach a crossroads in life, right? And you can either take the road that you've been traveling and just continue on that path, or you can take a path that's like different and
feels like a risk and it's scary, and it's like the Wizard of Oz, you know, and you might meet some scary friends along the way, but it's like, that's the road that leads towards this utopia in our personal lives, this utopia to make the world a better place. Because I don't think it's unrealistic to think that heaven might actually be on earth instead of somewhere else. It could just be like, this is the life that we have this time around, and maybe we should make the most of it. And so yeah, I'll just stop there. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh yeah. Well, it's funny when you told me that you were naming your podcast Utopia, I started to think about where that word comes from. And I was an English major, so I love like the etymology of certain words. And actually, I know this because I've done a little bit of research on this word in college when I was writing a poem called Utopia, which I will not read to you. I will not make the audience suffer through that. But I remember from my research, it was actually the writer Sir Thomas More who coined the phrase utopia somewhere in like the early 16th century. And he actually wrote a book called Utopia. And if you actually look at the etymology of the word, utopia means no place, or nowhere. So the word itself is kind of a paradox, because on the one hand, like you're saying, the connotation is like heaven and like a perfect place where maybe there's no suffering, but then when you actually piece the word out, it means no place, nowhere, does not exist. So I've always liked that because it makes me feel like utopia is something that maybe we create internally, and maybe it's not so much an external experience, but maybe a little bit more of an internal kind of existential sort of adventure, I guess. And going back to Thomas More, the author who wrote this book about Utopia, his imagination of this place was like this little island that was perfectly curated in an organized way where everybody got along, and there's no locks on the door, and there's no such thing as private property. So that was his like that was his version of utopia. But I think we might all have different versions of it. So that's what I think when I think of that phrase.
Yeah, I love that too. And I mean, it reminds me of so many things. I grew up going to Catholic school, and so they would always teach us, like, it was a pretty progressive Catholic school, I think, as far as Catholic schools go, in New York City, like downtown Manhattan. And one of the things I remember taking away from that experience was like, you can always like have Jesus in your heart kind of thing, was like what they would say. And it's like, but what that meant was like, it's within you. You know, you don't have to like go to church. You can sit under a tree and be with your divine power, or ask for what you need, or meditate, or pray, or whatever that looks like for you. You don't have to follow these strict rules. And so I do think there's something there with that nowhere, no place, and that theme of the journey, right? Like, it's a journey. And I think that's the thing that people get wrong about utopia, if there is a such thing as wrong, because when I talk about it, the reaction I get from people often is like, well, that's just absurd. Right? But it's absurd because it's not possible. But the fact that the word means not possible is like, well, why can't we strive for something better? Just because something's not possible doesn't mean we shouldn't strive for something that's better, because better is certainly possible than what we have today as a society, as a world, as a whole, right?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And you're kind of reminding me too. I have a lot of ninth house placements in my chart. So for any of the astrology students who are listening, the ninth house is, sometimes correlated with international travel. And I've had a lot of that in my life. And there's a big part of my heart that really longs to leave, and kind of escape and run away and have an adventure. And I always am hit with that actually when I'm traveling, this kind of maybe cliche, like you can't run away from your problems. Like, and that might be kind of the paradox or the sort of shadow side of searching for utopia. Yet I absolutely agree with what you're saying, this sort of notion that why are we settling for less than mediocrity in our everyday life, like when we could be creating as a society maybe a better quality of life for everybody. And if we have the opportunity to do that, why wouldn't we do it, you know?
Yeah. So I would love to share your chart if that's okay as we talk, and I might pop it up and put it back down again. I hope it's not too distracting for the viewers, but so we are looking, here we go. So this is the chart of Mallory Hasty. For people who are listening and aren't viewing, we've got February 28th, 1995 at 1:51 p.m. Central Standard Time. And is it Hinsdale, Illinois? Hinsdale.
Yep.
With 25 degrees Cancer rising. So beautiful chart here. And already, like, I think we've hit on so much. And before we started recording, we were talking about like, oh, I think like we'll talk about Jupiter and we'll talk about Chiron. And, you know, we've talked about Jupiter and Chiron and the ninth house and Sagittarius already without even saying it. And so I kind of want to like break it down because I'm like, oh my gosh, where do we go? We've already talked about everything, but we actually haven't explained any of it yet at the same time. And so Mallory was talking about the ninth house here. So this is the sort of slice of the pie at the top of the chart here, where it's the ninth house. And the house system that I'm using has Regiomontanus, but even in whole sign, we'd see you have a lot of ninth house placements. And so that is like that travel, that sort of cross-cultural and aspirational place in the chart, right?
Totally.
Yeah. And then just to take a step back, because I think we'll jump into Jupiter next, but I think it's really interesting because Sir Thomas More, wasn't he like a religious or spiritual, right?
Yes.
Like in the church.
Yeah, he actually was part of his fame is related to writing Utopia. But another thing that he's known for is he would not, he refused to maybe acknowledge Henry VIII as the like head of the Church of England when Henry VIII like switched things over to make sure that he could get a divorce or whatnot. And
Yeah.
Sir Thomas More said, I am not acknowledging this guy as the head of the church. And I'm pretty sure that's how he died. I think he was executed or something like that for his refusal to, acknowledge Henry VIII. But I will say, if you're not familiar with Thomas More, later down the line in, I guess, like the history of literature, there's this dude named Jonathan Swift who wrote Gulliver's Travels. And if you've heard of that, which might be a little bit more commonly known than the book Utopia, Gulliver's Travels has a lot of influence from Sir Thomas More's Utopia. So that's my little English major nerd plug there.
I love this. And I'm being brought back to my 11th grade English class when we did read Utopia. My English teacher ends up listening to this. She's like, Taylor, I taught you this. But you know, I'm over twice that age now, I think. So but it's so interesting that you bring this up. There's so many connections right there because Henry VIII, I was doing some research on this Jupiter-Neptune conjunction that we had in Pisces, which was exact, I think, April 8th. But Jupiter just a couple days ago, as of the day that we're recording this in early May, it was still in Pisces, and we're going to have Jupiter go back into Pisces. And so I was looking historically at other times when Jupiter and Neptune were conjunct, and one of them was in, I think it was 1524, and it's when Henry VIII, I'm pretty sure, I think it was Henry VIII, had a festering wound on his leg from a jousting accident. And so it's like, okay, I know that the jousting accident and Sir Thomas More might not be connected, but I just think it's not a coincidence that you're bringing this up, because a festering wound is also a Chiron thing. We're talking about like Jupiter and Chiron again. It's like, here we go. I might have to dig into that a little bit deeper.
Yeah. And, when we're talking about Utopia, this was something we were kind of, I can't remember if I was talking to you about this or Mandy Ray at the Astrologer conference in Tucson a couple weeks ago, but I was saying, we were surrounded by a lot of evolutionary astrologers, I would say, at that conference. And I tend to be a little bit more of like a Hellenistic astrologer, although I do really respect evolutionary astrology. And a big part of evolutionary astrology is kind of past life and working through our karma and like kind of putting together the story of our North Node and South Node and what that could mean for us from a past life, and relating that to Henry VIII and Utopia. I think a big part of human existence that maybe has kept us from truly grasping at that version of Utopia we may all have in our minds is power discrepancies amongst rich people and politicians and kings and et cetera, et cetera. And I was saying like, oh man, like, looking at our presidents and the world's dictators and, the powerful, let's say the powerful men of the world who are saying, let's go to war when none of their people actually want to go to war, all of that stuff. I wonder the karma of that. I wonder the evolutionary story of that. And I wonder if, I don't mean to get too past life woo-woo on us, but I mean, Henry VIII, he's certainly walking around in some form right now, right? In some person's body, I think. And these lessons don't go away. So I'm wondering about that Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, maybe even bringing us to like a higher consciousness with how we go about even shaping society as a whole. There's some really big themes that I'm thinking about, but I don't know if I'm getting too off track with bringing that.
I love it. It's fascinating. And actually, like, I was actually just having a conversation with someone else for another episode of the podcast. And I ended up mentioning, it's really interesting. I'm starting to see this whole thing about how I think it's more common today to talk about it as like the person, I got the lesson from another person. Like I had a person in my life, something difficult happened, and then the same person showed up in a different person's body. And I'm realizing recently that it is the same person in a different body. It is like a person is actually like hundreds, thousands, millions of people having simultaneous experiences without any knowledge. And I mean, that is ultimately how I think of humanity and how I think about life. But I do think that there's like certain like threads, like verticals or horizontals or however you want to think about it, where it's like these people like pop up all over and you see it, it's like you can recognize it. Like if you are a seeing person, like, or hearing or whatever, like that tone in someone's voice where they say the word the same way. And it's not just because they're both from the same town in Michigan. It's like, it's something there, or like the look in someone's eyes when you look at them really deeply. And it's like, and then they say something or they do something, or like, they just sort of like that grace that they move with. It really is true. And so when you're saying, oh, well, he's around somewhere, like, he certainly is. He's somewhere. Even though like people die, we also don't. We're just not really aware because our brains in these bodies at this moment can't really handle that. But I think that this thread that you're pulling through too of like the religion is interesting, because I just read this quote. So I'll read it and we'll see if it makes sense to other people, but it seems to make sense to me. And this is from Barbara Hand-Clow's book on Chiron. So this is again like that connection to Chiron with the Jupiter and the Neptune again. And it says Chiron energy is the exact moment, the exact place, the exact point of awareness, the chirotic point. Christ said we would need to enter the kingdom of heaven through the eye of a needle. This is the perfect metaphor for the polarity of mastering the 6th house, or the eye of the needle, to enter the kingdom or cosmic attunement, the 12th house. This is the key concept of this book. Enter totally into your body-mind balance in your personal life, and God is waiting on the other side. And so it brings us back to that utopia again, because I think like entering through the eye of the needle, we talk about that with rich and wealthy people all the time, right? Like that's normally what people, one of the big examples they'll use when they say that phrase is like, oh, well, you've got to enter through the eye of a needle. You know, camel can't enter through the eye of a needle to get to the kingdom of heaven. You've got to leave all that baggage behind. You've got to be really pure, and you can't take those material possessions with you. But then also, like what I was saying before about how you can like sit under a tree and access this information, and that it's just there. You know, it's that mind body balance. But also, when we have this information, when we have the astrology, when we can get to know ourselves better, we can be in better balance, right? And then we can access that God, or whatever you want to call it, that leads us to utopia, because it is a journey, not a destination. And it's really like, what are we aware of? So I know I just went all over the place. I probably sound insane, but I feel like in some dimension, it makes sense to someone.
Well, I think this is what happens when you, a Pisces rising, together with me, a Pisces sun and moon, we form a triple Pisces, and this is where our conversations go.
Yep. I love it. I love it. Absolutely. But I think that quote's also really interesting because Barbara Hand Clouse says that Chiron rules the 6th house and rules Virgo. And you have Chiron in Virgo natally. And when we're recording this, the moon is on your natal Chiron in Virgo. And I have Virgo in this, it's the 6th house, 7th sign, 6th house, could be one way of saying it. So I've got it in the 7th, got it in the 6th. And there's just something there about, the 3rd house is that communication, you know, you pulling in the English major, you know, pulling in that literature, pulling in that knowledge, and this 6th house polarity of mastery, Virgo being like really needing to discern, really needing to master something, having that subject matter expertise in order to improve people's lives and make the world a better place, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. And you know, I think about my Virgo Chiron a lot, and I think Melanie Reinhardt, who also is an astrologer, along with Barbara Hand Cloud, they both have written books about Chiron. And I haven't read Barbara's book that you just read from, but now I really do, because that quote was amazing. And but I have read Melanie Reinhardt, the Chiron and the Healing Journey. And I believe in there, she also says Virgo is one of Chiron's strongest signs. And I've always related to that, because I do feel like there's some kind of strong Chironian presence in my life. And having Chiron in the 3rd house, having that kind of wounded healer energy in the realm of communication and the throat chakra and the mind and the narratives that we form, that's been a big actually struggle for me my whole life. And feeling understood has been something that feels a little bit wounding to me. So I can really kind of feel through that Chiron there in the 3rd house. But the thing about all Chiron placements, I think, that we have to remember is sometimes the thing that we feel the most wounded about is actually what heals others. So I had that experience when I was first starting my podcast back in 2018. Like I had this big wound about, I don't know, speaking on a podcast and not making any sense, and And then my words end up really resonating with some other people. And that ended up being something that kind of helped me launch my business later. So that's something we have to remember about Chiron. Sometimes our biggest insecurity is what others think is great about us. I'm not sure if that's been anything that you've ever tapped into with Chiron.
Yeah, you know, you're like, I'm having chills right now, like goosebumps on my skin, because I'm remembering my Chiron, which I focus on so much. But as I'm hearing you say it, I'm like, okay, yeah, I have Chiron in Gemini, fourth sign, third house. Also, that third house and Gemini, that Mercury ruled Chiron in the place of speaking, in the ruled by the planet of communication and speaking. And, you know, this is one of the first podcast episodes that I'm recording, and you're making me feel so good about it. But yeah, there is like this total like imposter syndrome. And I just said a minute ago, like, I don't know if this makes sense to anyone, and I'm putting it out there anyway. And, you know, maybe someone does resonate with it. Hopefully, if you're listening, right?
Yeah. And I think that's something that a Mercury ruled Chiron, like Chiron in Gemini, Chiron in Virgo. We have 2 Mercury Chirons here. That's something that maybe they're learning in a sense. They're learning to trust their own instinctive truth. They're learning to trust, you know, I'm interested in talking about this topic. Okay, I'm going to trust it and talk about it. Even though the narrative of, oh, no one cares about this, why would someone listen to this, or why would this even matter, that tends to creep in really easily for the Mercury Chiron person, I think.
Totally. And you know what else I'm realizing? We both have a trine. We both have a trine to Venus. So you have Chiron trine Venus, and I have Chiron trine Venus. You have it in the earth signs. I've got it in the air signs.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. I forgot that.
It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, Chiron trine Venus. I don't focus on that too much in my own like examination of my chart, but that's actually something that is probably good for me to remember, that I have that.
Yeah, and it's like there's something beautiful about how we relate and how we go through this journey of you know, whatever the wounding is, whatever the learning is, whatever the healing is, and then how we help others and relate to others in that.
Yeah, because sometimes people unconsciously, of course, but sometimes people don't want to touch their Chiron wound because it's something that feels really shameful and maybe sticky, or something that you would rather just repress down and not really acknowledge. And I think that's why a lot of us perhaps don't necessarily ever really get to know our Chiron placement, because it's like, well, why would I want to know this like shameful part of me? Or why would I want to acknowledge the part of me that I'm constantly second guessing? And that can be really painful. But I think if more people were aware of astrology and their own astrology, and they kind of saw it as medicine to help them know themselves, I think more and more people would maybe kind of come around to studying their own Chiron placement just a little bit more.
Yes. Yeah. And say more about that last sentence of like, if more people knew about astrology. Like,
well, I hate to be this biased, because as a professional astrologer, I don't believe that you need astrology to live like a happy life. But when we're talking about utopia and creating a version of society that maybe even has a greater quality of life for every single person, I feel like there's something intrinsic about the study of astrology being kind of threaded within that. I'm not sure if there's a subject that can bring us self-awareness faster than astrology. And I also don't know if there's a subject that can help us learn how to empathize with others faster than astrology. So even just basic knowledge of your chart can help you know yourself better, but it can also help you maybe understand someone else's wounding, to even on some surface level way. There's just something about this study of astrology that I think promotes understanding between other people and understanding of other people's differences that feels like it has to be a part of whatever utopia we're talking about.
Yeah. And I think that what you just said is such a beautiful expression of your Chiron Venus trine, that you can really help to see the good in people and help people to see the good in themselves and the good in one another. Like I remember one of the first times we talked, I was telling you, oh, I'm going through this like Venus thing in my progress chart, and Saturn's there by transit too. And you said the most beautiful thing to me. I don't know if you remember, and I don't remember the exact words that you said, but you just really helped me reframe it in a way. And it was about, you know, you said something like, I see these Venus transits as an invitation to help us know how to better love ourselves.
Mm.
And I thought about that regularly since you said it to me. And it just totally hit the nail on the head for me. I was like, that is what it is. And it was almost like I was coming to that realization naturally, but you put the words, Chiron in the Mercury rule sign, you put the words to it for me in a way that I really needed to hear. And I think astrology can do that.
I don't remember saying that, but I'm glad. I'm glad it hit you where it needed to hit.
Yeah, it did. Oh, and I just lost. There's something else I wanted to say about this Chiron Venus. I don't remember, but that's okay. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about with you is we've got, I mentioned Jupiter just moved into Aries. Today is, I think it's the 11th of May when we're recording this, and this episode won't come out for like at least another month, but Jupiter will still be in Aries when this episode comes out. And it's exciting. This happens once every 12 years or 11.8 or something like that. And Jupiter moves through Aries really quickly, moves through Pisces really quickly. And so we don't get a ton of it, but we get a bit more Aries than we did of the Pisces. So that's good. Some people may not like Jupiter in Aries. I think it's fabulous. It's triplicity ruler. So I think it's got some decent dignity. And you have Jupiter in Sagittarius, which it rules the sign of Sagittarius. And excuse me, you are a traveler. And so what's your take on this Jupiter and Aries? What are you looking forward to?
Yeah, well, there's something about Jupiter and Aries that I think that can kind of give us I feel like there's like a trend on TikTok or something where it's like, who gave you the audacity? Like Jupiter and Aries like gives us the audacity to do what we've been wanting to do. And I have to say, I've been talking about this on like my Instagram lives and my podcasts, but Jupiter and Pisces, the transit we just went through from, end of 2021 until beginning of May 2022, Jupiter and Pisces kind of felt like a little bit of a soupy disappointment in a lot of ways. I mean, I don't want to disrespect the energy at the same time, so I don't want to like kind of, I guess, tell the story from my own bias, but I did see a lot of maybe even mental health struggles. And I saw a lot of people having some trouble finding their way and making decisions and feeling lost. And I think even though Jupiter in Pisces is really strong in Pisces, it's actually strong in a more non-material way. Like Jupiter in Pisces, we might even be able to tap into it more as a society if we were a little bit more like monks living in Tibet in some sort of sanctuary, like that might be the lifestyle that is more conducive to really tapping into the magic of Jupiter in Pisces, because it's so esoteric and mystical. But in everyday Western life, where I'm coming from in my narrative, there's really not a lot of room to tap into Jupiter and Pisces, because we always have to be go, 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 do. Our society doesn't feel very aligned with the true expression of Jupiter and Pisces. So maybe that's one of the reasons why subjectively I saw a lot of tougher manifestations of this transit in people's lives. And now that Jupiter is moving into Aries, I think we might have an easier time when it comes to maybe even what like capitalism wants us to do, which is to like take on a lot and commit to a lot and keep going and not stop, don't take a rest. That's something that Jupiter and Aries might kind of bring us, this sense of busyness or this sense of go, 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 do. But in a little bit more of a zoomed out perspective, Jupiter and Aries at its core might be able to help us overcome fears or challenges as well. Because there's something about Jupiter and Aries, like I said, it has this audacity, it has this grit or gumption to take the risk or go along a new path or do something that just feels a little bit crazy. For me, it's been like buying a random ticket to Mexico City, kind of spontaneously. That's a Jupiter and Aries kind of thing. So those are some of the things I'm thinking about with the shift from Jupiter and Pisces to Jupiter and Aries.
So I'm just going to share your chart again.
Yeah.
Because as you're talking, so here we've got Pisces up here and Mal's Jupiter in Sagittarius in the 5th house using this house system. And I think it's so interesting that your experience of Jupiter through Pisces was going through, and you said late 2021. I think it was there May and June of 2021, and then January 2nd for some reason sticks in my head for when it came back. I could be wrong, but definitely early this year until May 9th. And you've got this 8th, 9th house, 8th, 9th sign kind of thing going on with Jupiter. And so what you saw were these struggles. 8th house is often psychological struggles, trauma, grief, that sort of a thing. And it expanded that for you and you saw it, which we have the luminaries. The luminaries sometimes can signify sight, right? And so it's like, it can be physical sight or it can be like just experiential sight. And so I think it's really interesting, Jupiter transiting over these planets for you. And it also went over your natal Saturn. It's like Saturn is becoming the authority and things like that. And it's like, so you were able to be this authority counselor to people, 9th house counselor, close advisor to people who were having this experience. And people might have had different experiences. Like for me, Pisces is my ascendant, but my ascendant is at 29 degrees. And so I really struggle with this. It's like, okay, is this my 12th house or is this my 1st house? And I just, like a true Pisces rising, go with the flow. And I just see what it feels like. It's like, let's test it out. And Jupiter and Pisces for me really was like a lot of behind the scenes thing. I was sick for most of that time. I wasn't feeling great last May and June. I had these mysterious illnesses. We've got Neptune by transit there. Neptune kind of puts this weird ambiguity over things. But 12th house can be, kind of being isolated. And sometimes you're isolated because you're not feeling good and you can't go out, like you're in the hospital or you're in your bed and something like that. And so that Jupiter and Pisces for me, for sure, was like stuck in bed a lot of the time. And then I also did end up traveling, and the traveling also had me kind of like isolated from the people who I normally would be around on a day-to-day basis. And so then you were talking about travel. And so you've got again, 8th, 9th house. So by transit, activating you to travel to faraway places, but then Jupiter and Sagittarius naturally like would be traveling a lot, right? Sagittarius is like, let's roam, let's wander, let's go do the things and then teach people about it.
Totally. And you know, a lot of my spiritual path has been paralleled with traveling. Like I don't think I would have stumbled upon the tarot or even stumbled upon the possibility of being a professional astrologer without also traveling at the same time. So you're really hitting the nail on the head there.
Yeah, and the other thing that you said that I think is so interesting, which I'm seeing we have in common also, is Jupiter square the sun natally. And this a square is a difficult aspect. It's a 90-degree aspect where it's kind of like sitting in a chair and like needing the energy to like stand up and like go do something about it. But when you actually look at what could that mean with Jupiter and the sun, it's like overextending ourselves. It's taking on too much and spreading ourselves too thin, to that point that you had about capitalism. It's like, what do we want to take on? What do we want to do? And so I would imagine you might have been feeling some of that stuff with Jupiter and Pisces too, because Jupiter was square your natal Jupiter. It was going over your sun and your moon and your Saturn. And so now I'm going to have it because I'm going to have my Jupiter return when Jupiter moves into Aries. And it will not this year, but I think end of the year next year, it will square my sun when I have my Jupiter return, when it goes exact. And we do need to think about that. Like, and it does tie back into this whole eye of the needle, wealthy people, capitalism. What do we do?
Yeah. And, you know, I wonder too, like when we're talking about utopia and even this sort of astrological consideration that we all have to kind of take on as professional astrologers, this question of fate versus free will. And, you know, what is fated? What is our destiny? What do we actually walk into versus what is free will? And like, how much do we utilize like our choice to walk out the door, get out of bed or not get out of bed or not leave the house? And all of that stuff kind of relates, I think, to, in a way, capitalism and utopia. And I wonder if utopia is somewhere where maybe it's a little bit like fate or destiny is something that is, I guess, promoted or encouraged a little bit more, or maybe there's some kind of trust in the sort of cosmic timeline, if you will. Whereas in a capitalistic society that we're living in, it's all about free will and hustling and almost not trusting and keeping everybody in a scarcity mindset. When we're in a scarcity mindset, it's harder, I think, to tap into cosmic timing because we almost aren't able to because of our survival instincts being revved up. So that's something I'm thinking about too. Somehow you led me there. I'm kind of losing my thread on how I got here.
I gotcha. 1,000%. So, and I'm like, I don't know if I should share this, but I've got, why not share it? I can always share it again some other time. So I haven't recorded this yet. And, but I did research on this Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. And I know this isn't pretty because it shows all the things over here, but this is like a presentation that I put together to record on the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. And this ties us back to the whole thing. And what I looked at basically was when Jupiter was traveling through the signs of Aquarius, Pisces, and Aries, and Neptune was in the sign of Pisces over the past 1,000 years or so. Because past that, it's kind of hard to find research on in the areas that I have access to, like the internet, basically, on what actually happened on those dates. So the dates were, it was 1357 to 1358, 1524, 1690, and 1856 were the dates that I looked at. And what's really interesting is that there is this theme. If we talk about Jupiter, Neptune, it's about making the world a better place, utopia, socialism, communism, all of that good stuff of like, because that's what Pisces is. Pisces is compassion. Pisces is bringing us together. It's like this, I call it the mycelium mind network of like, you know, how little mushroom ideas pop up like all over the place and people are starting to use the same words. It's the zeitgeist. But it's also, it's a compassionate, it's infusing compassion into the zeitgeist because Jupiter expands, Neptune diffuses, disperses. And so the point that I'm trying to make is that in 1357 and 1358, and I think this was December to April, the conjunction also like moved by 1 month every time. I don't know if that's mathematical or not, but it was happening when planets were moving through Pisces for the past couple times, which makes it even like the personal planets, which makes it even more interesting because it means that you've got a buildup of energy in the sign of Pisces when those two major outer planets are there. Of course, they didn't know about Neptune. We know, so we can look back on it, but they at the time didn't know what was going on. But the Jacquerie was a peasants' revolt. And then we've got another peasants' revolt that happened in 1524. And so it's just really interesting to think about like how we've got this thread of like compassion and let's make the world a better place. And the Jacquerie, I'm trying to remember, I know the Peasants' Revolt, you know, I might have gotten these backwards. I feel like the Peasants' Revolt happened before the Jacquerie happened. I'll have to double check on that. But the Peasants' Revolt, I believe, happened in Germany. No, it did happen in 1524 because it was the same time that Luther was posting his theses. And Luther did not agree with this Peasants' Revolt. But essentially, the monarch, the person who was in charge, was like telling people to eat snails off the field. And they were like, we're not going to do that anymore. I think we need some food. We need some land. We'd like to have access to our own resources. And so they revolted when Jupiter and Neptune were in Pisces. And as Jupiter moved into Aries, the revolt was squashed, unfortunately, because they didn't have resources, because they didn't have access to the wealth that they needed to pay, to move, to do the things that they needed to do to actually be successful in their revolt. And the Jacquerie was happening in France. And I'm totally blanking in my mind, but it was, I think it was during the 100 Years' War. And this was just one of the revolts. And same thing happened, Jupiter, Neptune, the revolt began with the peasants having an uprising. And as soon as Jupiter went into Aries, the wealthy, capitalist, patriarchal government ended up winning and squashing the revolt, unfortunately. So I don't say that because it's like, oh, you know, don't have hope. It's like, we need to look at the past in order to learn how to move forward. I'm also not advocating for war. But there are movements, and we use the tools that we have in order to move a social movement forward. And so we absolutely should look at it. So you can also look at 1690, the English Bill of Rights happened. And so it's like, it doesn't always have to be this destructive way of expanding our rights. And we should have a conversation about how to make the world a better place in the context of being in this capitalist society today. And so, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that doesn't surprise me. That it's weird that it's, well, I shouldn't say it's weird. It's interesting that like the stereotype of Pisces is like, oh, little fairy child or whatever. But as history shows us, sometimes Pisces kind of shows us where like humanist sort of humanist kind of projects or revolts or protests kind of happen, where a bunch of people get together and say, hey, we're all human, why don't we have equality, or why don't we have the same rights as you do, or whatnot. And there's something very Piscean about that, because that's ultimately what Pisces is trying to show us as a sign, and I guess a more esoteric way, like this sense that our souls are the same in some context, or like our souls are infinite and everlasting, and no human, every human is the same in that context. And here in the earth world, we have these differences that cause a lot of violence and trauma in this world. And I'm feeling like that makes a lot of sense, that the transition between Pisces and Aries is like, okay, how do we fight for this humanistic kind of mission in whatever context? And then the Aries comes around and it's kind of like, wait a second. But
yeah. And it is this natural progression, because as you were saying, it's like your experience of the Jupiter through Pisces transit has been really witnessing and holding the space for people who've been struggling emotionally, psychologically, going through some stuff that's really difficult. And then when you get to Aries, it's like that wateriness, that kind of, I forget the word that you used, it was really awesome, but like soupiness evaporates with the fire of Aries. It's taken away. And when that soup that kind of weights us down evaporates and we're left with these feelings that are really heavy, what do we do in Aries? We take action because we can't take it anymore. It's like, we're not gonna take it. And I don't mean that like lighthearted, because like this is some really heavy stuff we're talking about, but it's like, so I just went to my notes for the Jacquerie. It's okay, so let me read this. It's interesting. So the rebellion is known as Jacquerie because it originated when the peasants were tired of the nobility condescendingly referring to peasants as Jacques or Jacques Bonhomme. And today, what do we have? I'm getting like chills again. What do we have? We have recently the murder of George Floyd, and we have this inversion where people are now being called Karen.
yeah. Oh, wow.
And it's this thing where it's like, we've got the same name thing going on, the same person incarnating again and again. And it's that theme again. I mean, these are the archetypes. Like the archetypes don't lie. You can interpret them many different ways, like we're doing right now, but it's like the energy is there. And so this Karen thing really is about calling out privilege, but the Jacquerie is famous for being mysterious too, because it was happening during Parisian revolts and during the Black Death. We've got COVID now, Black Death, COVID, there's that similarity there. And one of the mysteries about the Jacquerie was like, was this just like a burst of sort of like hatred and an irrational explosion from the peasants, or was it truly an extension from that Parisian revolt? But they were looking at these nobility, at these people who were really wealthy, and they were being condescendingly referred to by them as Jacques, and they were like, give me some respect, like put some respect in my name, right? And we've got that same thing, like that is the song now, put some respect on my name. And yeah, I just love when the astrology works.
It really does. Yeah. And I think it's cool. It's cool. We don't get the sort of historical little snippets that we're sharing in the pop astrology land, just scrolling on Instagram or TikTok. And, we don't get this kind of deep dive, I guess. So I like to hear about it, and I like to hear how it all relates.
Yeah. Another thing that's really interesting I'm remembering is that part of the Black Death, if we're going to say like we've got COVID, they had the Black Death, the plague, was one of the reasons that historians think that the Black Death and the plague happened was some of this like unequal taxation that was going on. And I don't know the particulars, but I remember that being a real thing. And we're talking about the same thing today in the United States, is like, should we change taxes? Is it really fair? And also how COVID was spread through people who really didn't have any other option but like going to work. Or I don't want to say that they're responsible for spreading it, but it was like, there was this thing happening where people had to go to work, still have to go to work, expose themselves potentially, or not go to work and not expose themselves and not expose their families. And just like work and taxation coming into the question there.
Yeah, because if you think about it, I'm not up to date on my Black Death history, but from what I'm like remembering, you're completely right. It was out of the millions and millions of people who died, a lot of percentage of the deaths were more, I guess, peasant
Commoners.
commoners. That's a good word. Yeah, like the commoners, because how did the Black Death spread? Well, they didn't know about germs back then, and they didn't have indoor plumbing or whatnot. And where commoners were living, it was in close quarters. And there's something about the spread of disease and the rich people getting to hide from that. And this might also kind of bring up the topic right now of landlords and inflation and sort of this living in close contact, close quarters with the commoners of the 21st century. like that could be something that we could relate to about that time to now.
Totally. And so that's a good transition to bring me back to your chart, because the other thing that I thought was interesting, we started talking about the nodes and evolutionary astrology, and I kind of mix things together. I like to say I have a liberal arts approach. I got my liberal arts bachelor's degree, and I've got a liberal arts approach to astrology as well. And so talking about like real estate and things like that, I think it is really interesting that you do have your North Node in the fourth house, fifth sign, fourth house. And so there is something there about, and then your Jupiter in Sagittarius that likes to travel, and then having this Pisces stellium where you've got that travel energy as well coming in, and how that relates to home and things like that. It's something that we have in common, is wanting to be or trying to be digital nomads, or we are digital nomads, but like keeping it going until we feel like rooting. And so I'm just curious, like your experience of, do you use the nodes and no worries. Do you use the nodes, and what's your experience of like having that North Node in Scorpio at all?
Well, I definitely contemplate the nodes a lot. I would say that they're the part of the chart that I feel like the least confident about, in the sense of like, I'm not sure if anybody really knows what they mean. like there's like the evolutionary take of the South Node being like baggage from the past life, and the North Node being what we're trying to step into. So I definitely see a lot of validity in that. But then if we go into more of a Hellenistic or even a Vedic approach, it's sort of like both ends of the nodes are sort of bad for different reasons. I think we could just say in general, what I've kind of settled on is the nodes themselves are both, I tend to go with maybe both difficult in different ways, but also just maybe points of karma. And our surface level understanding of karma is, karma's a bitch or whatever. But it really doesn't do a justice to karma just being kind of energy that we collect from our interactions, from our exchanges, whether that be positive or negative energies. So I just kind of see the nodes as points of energy. And when I'm looking at my Scorpio North Node in the fourth house of the home, I'm thinking about how much I actually long for living somewhere that I just absolutely love. I was watching this like Vogue YouTube thing yesterday. It was Blake Lively. She was going through her like looks over the past decade, and something Blake Lively said was in that video, she said, "Oh, New York is the love of my life." And I was just so envious of her feeling like that, because I really wish I did have like a singular place that was the love of my life that I could kind of live in, but I just haven't found it yet. And I wonder if I will find it, or if that's part of my North Node in Scorpio in the fourth house. Like maybe this idea of home, fourth house, is kind of being challenged in some way in this lifetime.
Well, what I thought was really beautiful, because I was looking at the North Node in Scorpio in the fourth house, or you could say fifth house, however you want to look at it. And then that Jupiter in Sagittarius, fifth house, sixth house, bringing those energies together. So we're talking about fourth, fifth, and sixth house. So home and family's fourth house. Fifth house is like our joy, our pleasure, like our creativity. And the sixth house is the work that we do, the skills that we have, the help going through the eye of the needle. And this thing that I know about you, Mallory, is that like you do travel, you're this digital nomad, you go different places. It's sort of like, you know, there's different reasons. Maybe you feel called, or maybe an opportunity comes up, or there's a conference or something. But I recently was reminded that I think it was Stephen Forrest said that the fourth house sometimes is like, you find angels who kind of help you find home. And so it's sort of like, sometimes it is, you have familial responsibilities, or you have a close, you have like a lot of real estate, or you have an ancestral connection. But sometimes it's like in this lifetime, we have angels in the form of friends, or like random people who are like, come stay at my house. And the fact that you're doing it with this creative thing that you do, astrology is extremely creative. And it's the work that you do that you're very skilled at, sixth house, is like pretty cool to see how I'm seeing the chart play out like that. I don't know if you feel the same or not, that you might find some angels that offer you places to stay.
I hope. And, you know, that has been true. That definitely has been true in my history. And I will say I'm going through my nodal reversal right now, which means that my North Node, Scorpio, South Node, Taurus, and transiting nodes right now are North Node, Taurus, South Node, Scorpio. So the transiting nodes are opposite to my natal nodes. And I've kind of been tapping into what exactly that means. So
yeah. And it's interesting because where they are in the sky right now has been by sextile and trine, which are positive supportive aspects, hitting your Chiron in Virgo. So that feeling that you just expressed of like, I felt so envious of like having a place that like I'm in love with, and just like wanting to find one place. I remember being there when I was in my late 20s, like Saturn return time. Like I would go on job interviews and be like, I'm trying to root. I'm trying to find a place to root, to settle down. And I did my best. And now I'm like, I built a tiny house on wheels for a reason, because I knew deep down I wanted a house. Like I didn't want the house to change. I didn't want to like get moving boxes all the time, but like I needed to move, you know? And so there's a delicate balance of like this upset from moving all the time, and then actually having some continuity and the comfort that comes there, and the ease that comes with like the same. But you're not the kind of person, you don't strike me as the kind of person who's like happy with just like, let's do the same thing every day for the rest of our lives.
yeah, no, definitely not. And, you know, someone had told me that recently we were, you know, I was with some astrologers, we were doing kind of like a reading trade kind of practice situation. And someone did, you know, no offense to them, I mean, we were all kind of beginners and just kind of practicing. And, you know, maybe we all say things to other people that don't resonate 100%. But, and even sometimes it's a gift when we hear something that doesn't resonate, because it points us to what does resonate. But someone pointed out my Saturn return in the ninth house, and they were like, oh, the Saturn return, like you're going to have to finally like settle down, and, you know, you're going to finally have to like stop traveling, or like kind of start like rooting somewhere and kind of get down to business. And I just like automatically, my intuition was like, oh, I don't know about that. Like, I don't think that actually is why my soul is here. I'm not sure if I'm meant to just stay in the same place forever. So we'll see about that. But there's something there with travel for me in my chart for sure.
Yeah, and that's really interesting because I'm thinking, I've got Saturn conjunct Uranus on the midheaven in the ninth, which kind of, it's like ninth, 10th. And thinking about when I traveled, when Saturn was going through Scorpio would have been like 8th, 9th house. And then when it was returning, 9th, 10th house, what that was like. And it was, that is the time when I went to Paris. I got my graduate degree. I got my master's degree. So 9th house is also higher education and higher learning. It's foreign countries. So I went abroad. And this is before I like understood this much about astrology. Like I wasn't into, I had stepped away from astrology at that point in my life and didn't know what was going on. And I was just following the energies. And it's like, you got to do what makes your heart sing. And I am hearing from you and seeing in the chart that it makes your heart sing to do this. So I hope that if it is a rooting for you, it's because it's your choice and it feels really good because you have found that New York, and maybe you will find the New York that you're in love with, and it feels like an adventure every single day, So I think there's something in how we say things, the words that we choose to use, because they could be right, but like framing it as like, oh, you're gonna have to settle down, finally settle down. Sounds like a jail sentence. Sounds like a prison, right. And again, like, I don't know who it is, and I'm sorry, I'm not trying to offend you, but I'm just trying to prove the point that like, we can say things in a way that like, maybe you will find your New York, and maybe it will be an adventure for you every single day. And that will be your choice. And so it's like, this stuff can show up in weird and unexpected ways. Trying to think when it's in Pisces, where Uranus will be in Taurus, and I think it will still be a time of great change for you.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe I once asked another astrologer if there was a chance I could like live internationally, and granted I kind of already have, but I like maybe in a little bit more of a longer term sense, and they said yes. So my bias my bias likes that answer a little bit better.
Absolutely. And I'm looking at like Mars ruling Scorpio and Leo, and that fire trine of like, you've got that fire energy. Why not? And yeah.
Now
Absolutely.
we just got to find the place.
Yeah. Gotta find the place. And maybe one day we'll do an astrocartography episode, but I think we've been on a journey so far in this episode. We've talked about Pisces and Jupiter and Chiron and Thomas More and Utopia and traveling and all the things. But for you, Mal, I really do think that wherever you want to go, there will be angels supporting you. And I'm sure you already know that. They already do. And so whatever country you land in or city, they'll be there.
Well, thanks for saying that. That feels warm and fuzzy, especially, in less than a month, I'll be in Mexico City, and that's been a pretty spontaneous choice to go there. So I would appreciate the good vibes. So thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And I guess before we wrap, I should say, first of all, is there anything else that's on your mind that you want to talk about?
No, I love this. I thought this was an awesome conversation, and I love this sort of topic of utopia. And I'm going to think about that more after this episode too.
Yeah, and you've encouraged me to actually record this episode on Jupiter Neptune, because it is coming back into Jupiter is coming back into Pisces, and so we'll have another couple months of it, and I think it'll be really interesting for people to hear about that progression from Aquarius through Pisces and Aries. It's been such a pleasure. I'm just pulling up these notes here because I want you to share with people what is coming up for you, or what do you, I know you've got a class coming up soon.
Yeah, so besides doing professional astrology consultations, I'm also a tarot teacher, and I teach a class called, sometimes I call it Tarot for Personal Transformation, and sometimes I call it Tarot for Self-Discovery. It's the same class, I just keep switching the title, but we could just say it's Tarot for Personal Transformation and Self-Discovery. And basically it's a cool tarot class because we'll walk through all 76 cards. However, we're looking at the cards through the lens of personal transformation, self-discovery. So I've actually had a lot of students feel like this class helped them transform in some way, whether that be just knowing themselves on a deeper level, maybe using tarot on their own healing journeys. So if you're into that kind of thing, you should join the class. I would love to have you. And that will start June 26th, 2022. It's a Sunday. It's a live class on Zoom, but recordings are also available if you're more of a recording person. Although my ninth house of education loves talking to my students over Zoom in person. So I always do love when my students come to the live class, but sometimes time zones and life gets in the way. But yeah, anyways, that's like my big plug, tarot class starting June 26th, 2022.
I love it. And with Jupiter and Sagittarius and that ninth house energy, Mal is natally, she's born into this life to be a very gifted teacher, and that Chiron in Virgo, she's not only a healer and an astrologer and so multi-talented, but really a very gifted, talented, loving teacher. So definitely check out that course. And where can folks find you online?
So my main modality of social media is Instagram. So I'm on Instagram as @_ Mallory Hasty. And then I'm trying the TikTok world lately. So you can find me on TikTok at @Mal_the_ Pisces, Mal the Pisces, with underscores in between those words.
Very
So
cool.
I'd love to see you on TikTok and Instagram.
Very cool. And I will put in the show notes and the notes below also MalloryHasty.com and patreon.com/MalloryHasty and all of those links to the socials. If you'd like a consultation with either one of us for tarot or astrology, check us out. And we're both, I think, are your books open?
My books are open, yes.
All right. My books are open too. So come at us and we'll help you. We'll help you out. Yeah. So thank you so much, Mallory. It's been so wonderful. I love talking with you.
You're so welcome. And I can't wait to have you on my podcast eventually as well.
Yay, that'll be so much fun. I can't wait. Awesome. Well, take care, everyone. Thanks so much for listening today. Bye now. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of On Thriving. I hope it helps you on your journey to find new ways to thrive and think about how you can use this energy to make the world a little bit better. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a second to subscribe, comment, share, rate, and review, especially on Apple Podcasts and YouTube. It really helps me to reach more amazing people just like you, and I read the comments and reviews. Don't forget to take a screenshot, share it in your Instagram stories, and tag me at Taylor Shuler Astrology. If you're interested in an astrology consultation with me, you can book online at my website, taylorshuler.com. If you're looking for a beautiful short-term furnished rental in major US cities, check out hellolanding.com and use code Taylor_C6I. That's Taylor_C, the number 6, and lowercase letter I, when you book online at hellolanding.com for a discount. Love and gratitude. See you again real soon. Bye now.